the ethics in following Jesus solely and fully with your heart if it's a means to an end of salvation?
No, wait a second. The point is, if he was lying, that turns him into one of the most crass manipulators imaginable. Imagine if you have a professor who teaches you great teachings all semester long, and then just before the final exam he says, oh, by the way, you get below a 90, I will see to it that you get flunked out of this university. That dude's no good teacher. That dude's a crass manipulator. So if Jesus Christ...
Criteria, then I need to die and stay dead for another week?
No. If you die and rise from the dead, it gives tremendous credibility to what you say.
It was 3 days, my apologies, originally, but week was an arbitrary point.
You also have to be crucified and stabbed.
No, it's all right, it's all right. So what did you find out?
My point stands is that you can't make a claim of that nature and then not back it with some sort of a quantifiable truth. Now you're telling me that if a person then is visually killed in a way that atrocious, for lack of a better word, then they go into the ground, they are gone for X period of time, and they come back.
Yeah.
Only then can you decide that because you read this to be a case, that this person can be lent credence that they want to be a god.
No. What I'm saying is the evidence of Jesus rising from the dead points to his credibility.
But you're not giving evidence of it, you're just telling me it happened.
Yeah. All right, fine, then we'll talk about evidence of it. First of all, he really died. In the Gospel of John, we read that a Roman soldier took a spear and jammed it into his side, and an issue of watery serum, separate from red, hard, clotted blood, flowed from the side of Christ.
I won't argue he died.
So he's medically dead. Heart failure, massive clotting of the arteries, the dude is dead. He's wrapped in burial clothing, put in a tomb, stone is rolled in front, so he's dead and gone in the tomb. 3 days later, the tomb is empty, and he begins appearing over a period of 40 days to over 500 people at different times in different places, Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 15, risen from the dead.
So since it was written, it must be true.
Because he rose from the dead, the evidence is he's reliable.
Since it's written, it must be true.
No, not since it's written, it must be true.
I
Lots
once
of things
read
are
about a
written are
Russian
not true.
who died, went to the morgue, and woke up in the middle of his own autopsy a week later.
It's Russia.
Agreed. My point still stands. I'm not denying the lack of credence to the fact that it is Russia, but I'm making the point that it's written, and it's written by law and by medical professionals and by what exists in the same notion of what you argue. The paradigm is apples and apples either way. I wouldn't listen to the Russian any more than I would your God.
Well, the evidence is that Jesus lived an amazing life, taught fantastic ethical teachings, died on a cross loving and forgiving his enemies, and then rose from the dead.
No, that's where it stops.
Well, what's more likely?
You have no evidence of rising from the dead short of a book that you read and choose to have faith in.
And it's very simple. The only presupposition that you have to embrace is that God exists. Because if God exists, then a miracle is not irrational. Because a miracle is simply the supernatural God changing a natural law.
Which would mean you're
But if there is no God, then obviously miracles don't happen.
Well, but this still stands that you're taking everything on faith and not evidence.
No, the evidence is God exists.
You have faith in that.
Well, of course, I have faith
Which means
that you're standing there and I'm standing here. I have faith that we can communicate rationally. Can't prove any of that, but the evidence is there to support it.
Your professed evidence derives from faith, which makes it...
No, the evidence does not derive from faith.
Find me another form.
The order and the design of the cosmos is not something that my faith created or made up. The order and the design of the universe exists separate from me, separate from you. I observe the order and design and I ask myself, is it more reasonable to believe there's an intelligent mind behind that order and design? Or is it more reasonable to believe that there's no intelligent mind?
That's reasonable.
What do you think?
Given that it all dictated by chaos, I wouldn't give it an ordered, intelligent mind takes all of it.
That's the faith you just expressed. And what's your evidence that chaos
My
created it?
evidence is math that dictates chaos.
No, sir. Math does not show that there is no God who created.
No, but it says. I said that it dictates the form of a chaotic picture that we can give a overall idea to. Yes, but it's still chaos in its essence, which that would be my belief. Hence, as being chaotic, no, I can't lend that to one singular mind in all of its creation. Now, is there something happening that is very clearly a line? Yeah, of course there is. Things fall in the line of math. 1 and 1 will equal 2 regardless of where we are. Well, as far as we know at this point. But that's not an intelligent design. That's just the way things fell in. Without evidence in it.
Good.
It's not.
So there's your faith. That is just the way things fell in.
That's the evidence.
No. That is your faith. There is no evidence that this came about by chance. That's a philosophy. Now, my question is, rationally, why do you accept the philosophy that this kind of order and design comes about by chance?
How do we know it's chance?
Well, there's either an intelligent mind that created this order and design, or it comes about by chance.
It seems that your prerequisite belief of some sort of being leads you to believe that that being is good. I would assume that you believe God is good. And it becomes very odd, because if you believe that God is good, everything that God says is true. If they come out with a new gospel tomorrow and they say that God said that, you are compelled to believe it because God said it. Even if it says something that contradicts everything else, as some things in the New Testament contradict the Old Testament.
Okay, now you've raised about 5 fascinating issues. Which one do you want me to address?
Whichever one is strongest.
The best of the 5.
Or the most interesting.
Sir, once I see that the evidence points to God's existence, I do not conclude that He's good. I do not conclude that He loves us. There's too much suffering, too much evil, too much death for me to say, okay, the order and design point to the existence of some type of God. Okay. The rational mind that we all possess points to the existence of some type of God. The fact that life comes from life, in all of my observation, life never comes from non-life, it's far more reasonable for me to say, in the beginning, a living being, God, rather than for me to say, in the beginning, inanimate matter produces animate life. That's foolishness for me. But even after I've gone through all of that, I have no evidence that this being is good. All right? Now, the reason that doesn't frustrate me is for the same reason that I don't know you. But that doesn't condemn me to not building a friendship with you. But the only way I'm going to have the privilege of getting to know you is if you open up and tell me the truth about yourself. That's what Jesus Christ claims to be. This eternal mind opening himself up, revealing his character in a way that you and I can understand. Does that make any sense?
It does make sense. There are other issues that are raised by that. Well, for the one, you basically have to accept something that sounds like it's out of sci-fi first, that something can be entirely eternal. That's hard to believe, actually. It seems very hard to believe that something can be entirely eternal, but it is a very difficult question for anybody to answer, whether something can be eternal. So, we don't know. I can't answer that one. But, could you summarize that second point again so I could
You bet.
hear that?
The only way that I am going to know God's character is the same way that I'm only going to know your character. If God chooses to open up and reveal the truth about God, if you choose to open up and reveal the truth about yourself to me, then I possibly can get to know you, I possibly can get to know God.
Okay.
That is where you speaking to me the truth about who you are, your name, your interests, what you like, what you dislike, is so important. That's where Jesus Christ all of a sudden becomes so relevant. Because he claims to be God opening up and revealing, this is what I like, and this is what I dislike. This is my character. This is how I love. This is my commitment to justice. Now, obviously the question becomes, are you lying to me when you tell me about yourself? Is Jesus lying? That's obviously the question. Now, I will decide that you're either lying or not by spending time with you and by watching you treat people. Either back up what you say with your actions or live a life of a liar, a hypocrite. And then I'll know, guess what? I don't trust liars. I don't trust hypocrites because they're into lying big time. They're into deceiving. I'd be a fool to trust you. But if the evidence is you're reliable, honest, faithful, loyal, I will trust you. The same thing with Jesus. As I begin to look at him, I've got to figure out, is he a hypocrite? Is he a liar? Or is he totally trustworthy, a man of amazing integrity? And he gives us the criteria that we can judge him. While he's alive, he makes a big mistake. He says, I'm going to die, and then I'm going to rise from the dead. Ooh, that's a big mistake, Jesus, because now you've given us a way to falsify you. You died and stayed dead, you're a liar. Or you pull it off, wow, you are the truth. And the evidence, historical evidence, is that 3 days after he died, he rose from the dead. That's why I trust the guy.
What makes a man of Islam believe, not saved and go to heaven because believing that book rather than that of the text of the Bible or Torah?
Right. When you read the Quran and when you read the New Testament, you will see that there are a lot of similarities. But there are also some fundamental contradictions. Repeatedly in the Quran, Muhammad says, Jesus is not God. Repeatedly in the New Testament we read, Jesus is God.
So how do you determine which is true?
Well, by reading them closely and examining, how did Muhammad live? What did Muhammad teach? How did Jesus treat people? What did Jesus teach? The first reason I believe in Christ is because his teachings demand respect. But there have been a lot of people who've taught great teachings. A lot of people. So I'm not going to just believe in Jesus because he taught some good teachings. Second point, though, is I examine his lifestyle. And I notice that not only did he teach this incredibly high ethical standard, he lived up to it. He was no hypocrite. He displayed tremendous moral power in living up to this amazingly high ethical standard. John chapter 8, he could look into the faces of his enemies and say, which one of you can prove me guilty of sin? His enemies were silent. 1 John chapter 3, John, who lived with Christ intimately, could say, in him is no sin. You can talk to every one of my friends. You can talk to my wife and my children. All of them will tell you, Cliffe is a sinner. Meaning by that, Cliffe knows what's good. At times he does it, but at other times he does not do it. I am a sinner. Christ was not.
So he was consistent with what he preached, but that doesn't mean reliability of the actual historical evidence of that teaching.
And that's a different issue. We'll get to that. The third reason that I trust in him is because at the moment of his most excruciating pain, when he's nailed to a wooden crossbeam, instead of cursing his enemies the way I probably would have, he prays, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And the fourth and final reason that I trust him is because 3 days after he died, he physically, bodily rose from the dead. That makes it a no-brainer for me. If he rose from the dead, I think it's really clear, isn't it? He is reliable. You can trust him.
But that's again based on the reliability of the actual man.
Exactly. Okay. So now we'll move to the next question, right? Which is?
The historical facts that we're talking about.
You bet. Why do you trust the Gospels to give you accurate historical information about Jesus?
Well, there's a lot of consensus and it's consistent, but again, the same thing can be said of the Quran and a lot of them. Now, not that Muhammad's consistent in his lifestyle. He went from a violent warlord to very peaceful, but I'm saying the consistency of both documents are pretty...
Exactly. That's why I stand out here and say, I can get an accurate picture of Muhammad by reading the Quran, because the evidence is the Quran is a very reliable book historically.
Which says that Jesus was not the prophet.
Exactly. And I can get a very accurate picture of what Siddhartha Gautama Buddha taught, because the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama Buddha have been carefully preserved. So I start now to read them and compare. How did Buddha live? What was his thinking about how to solve the problems of life? What did Muhammad say? How did he live? What did he say is the solution? And the same with Jesus.
Doesn't that make you kind of see that the real thing is our humanity? We all recognize that we need to live moral, good lives, that there probably is something greater than us, but that we can't stick to one uniform idea of that, because that's what leads to oppression, heads getting cut off, women getting suppressed, people living their lives based on rules that were made 2,000 years ago, when I think the general consensus, even amongst atheists, is we're part of a bigger bigger thing that we can call God, or we could call a Big Bang back then, but to depict one above the others when all of them seem valid in their own right, it just seems, one might say ethnocentric, or one might say just deciding that one is above the others without the reason for that. I just don't see the reason why the Torah or why the Quran is less respected by you, I guess. Why Jesus is God, Muhammad's not the prophet. I mean, Jesus was more moral, but it seems like we're all getting the big picture. Buddha, Islam, Christianity, you're just deciding one is superior. I'm just wondering where the evidence is for that.
I am not deciding that one is superior. They all make truth claims. At times, the truth claims agree. At other times, the truth claims contradict each other. The law of non-contradiction works 100 times out of 100 when it comes to determining reality. A and non-A cannot both be true in the same way at the same time. They contradict each other. We look for evidence of reliability, and then we make a commitment. A follower of Jesus Christ is someone who has looked at the evidence that Christ is reliable. They've looked at the other options that they have seriously considered, be it materialism, hedonism, narcissism, rationalism, Islam, Buddhism, Judaism, whatever the options are that they've seriously considered. And then they make a decision based on the evidence of Christ's credibility, his reliability. I'm going to put my faith in him. And we all do that. So that is why, and guess what, sir? That's why for the past 32 years I've been speaking on university campuses. When people have pressed me hard about, why Jesus, and I answer them. But then I begin to realize, we're just going around in a circle here. We're just beating a dead horse. I just have two questions, and I'd like to fire those questions at you. I understand you don't believe in Jesus because there's not enough evidence that he's reliable. So, what or who are you living for? And what is the evidence that whoever and whatever you're living for is reliable?
Well, like my empirical experience, it leads me to believe there is a God just because there are too many small miracles in the world for it to not be engineered, but that's just my take on it. I like to live a moral life, and it seems like, you've adopted Christ because you think that's the best way to live a moral life and a life of faith as your connection to God, and that's great. But for me, I believe Jesus he existed. It's just that if we're going to be going as far as to qualify him as God, that's where I have trouble, just because I didn't have the luxury of seeing him rise from the dead. I have enough skepticism to question history just in general, to take it with a grain of salt. But I think that, the way you probably want to live your life is very similar to mine. I want to live a good life, recognize that I'm a very small, insignificant part of everything I'm around, and live for what I call God, to live up to a good standard. And I think we all want to do that, and I think you chose to adopt Christianity because you think that's the greatest manifestation of an organized faith, to live that kind of life. And I think that's great. I don't think you're fanatical at all. I just, my ability to have faith that Jesus is God, that's where I struggle, because...
You bet. And I understand that's a struggle. I have no problem understanding that, and I respect you highly. All right, here's why I cannot follow what you have said. If you listen, I think, to your thinking and to what you're saying, you view God and religions as sort of a smorgasbord, where you sort of pick and choose. You have great respect for Jesus. But the same Jesus who you have great respect for claimed to be God. So you choose to agree and accept something he says, but not other stuff.
I agree with how he led his life, and maybe not necessarily everything he confessed.
Right.
The way he treated people, the things he did, that is perfect.
Right.
But for him to say God, I didn't see him rise. The historical evidence of the other things, they're less miraculous. Like, I don't necessarily believe in the miracles. I look at Jesus almost maybe allegorical in a way, to say this is the way to lead your life, to live your life. But like miracles for me, I struggle with miracles being feasible compared to the alternative of people being wrong or it just being, embellished over 2,000 years,
Right. But you see, the reason that I can't follow that decision that you've made, the reason I can't make that decision is because Jesus, after giving these good ethical teachings, looked into the faces of his listeners and said, if you believe in me, you go to heaven. If you reject me, you go to hell.
then he's a means to an end. And where's the ethics in following Jesus solely and fully with your heart if it's a means to an end of salvation?
No, wait a second. The point is, if he was lying, that turns him into one of the most crass manipulators imaginable. Imagine if you have a professor who teaches you great teachings all semester long, and then just before the final exam he says, oh, by the way, you get below a 90, I will see to it that you get flunked out of this university. That dude's no good teacher. That dude's a crass manipulator. So if Jesus Christ gives all these great teachings about love and justice and honesty and faithfulness, and then he goes ahead and says, believe in me and you go to heaven, reject me and you go to hell. If he's speaking the truth, wow, I better trust in him. If he's not speaking the truth, I better not walk away saying, oh, he's a great teacher. No, the dude's a madman. He's a fanatic. He's an egomaniac. He's a crass manipulator. At a certain time in history, used the Jewish people to judge the Canaanites, to judge the Egyptians, and then a few hundred years later, he used the Assyrians and the Babylonians to judge the Jews.
You worship a God that works through people through killing people.
At times, yes.
Okay.
And I hope that you are very angry if someone rapes your sister, or if someone harms or destroys someone you love. I hope you are genuinely angry. There is such a thing as righteous indignation over the sex trafficking of children.
And then you kill them?
No, you're angry. And then you have to think through, how am I going to respond? If this guy comes up to him and knifes him, and I say, so what? Whatever. I don't love him. If I love him and he comes up and knifes him, I will seek to physically stop him from thrusting the knife in a second time. If I say, I don't care, then I am so self-absorbed that I don't really care about him, I really don't love him. God is angry, not in spite of the fact that he loves us. He's angry because he loves us, and we destroy each other or we destroy ourselves. That's why God is angry.
And to judge those people for not subscribing to because he's God, he is allowed to kill those that he loves. He kills them because he loves them. But they
No,
don't
he doesn't
act.
kill them because he loves them. That's not what I said. Come on, you guys, you're better than that. Think. Listen. Let's go back and forth and have a dialogue. I never said God kills people because he loves them.
Why did he kill them?
Because they destroyed other people.
Why did he care? Why did he not let
Because
them
he
go
loves.
free?
Because he loves people who get destroyed.
Them.
He judges people who destroy other people. It's that simple.
What does he love? He loves the people that they're destroying. He killed 3,000 of them. It was men, women, children, and neighbors, Cliff.
He killed those people because they had done evil. He judged them.
What evil did they do, Cliff?
The Jewish people began to sacrifice their babies in imitation of the Canaanites, who sacrificed their babies to Moloch, to Baal. And so the Jews began to copy their neighbors, the Canaanites, and began to sacrifice their babies as an act of worship. God judged them for that. Secondly, the Jews, in imitation of the Canaanites, the Midianites, the Hittites, and all the other tites, began to say that if you really want to know God, you have sex with a temple prostitute. God judged the Jews for following the Canaanites' example of temple prostitution and sacrificing babies.
And
that's why they got judged.
Those are the two reasons they were judged and murdered, or I guess let's use the word killed because that sounds nicer.
Killed the Canaanites.
In the book of Exodus.
That's exactly right. He killed the Canaanites
But he
for the
killed
same
Jews,
reason.
too. I have like two questions. When was the first record of the Bible? Like the first historical record of Christianity, what date was that?
Okay.
So I just
Talk
like a
more.
date.
What are you looking for?
Just the first record of Christianity, what date?
All right. One of my favorite books in the New Testament is 1 Corinthians.
Is there just a date?
1 Corinthians was written 50, 51, 52 AD. Somewhere right around there.
What do you say about the validity of Christianity based on the time frame of other religions? Because in my basic knowledge, I know Hinduism was established about 3,000 years before Christ, or the changeover. So that's 3,000 years of time that religion has been around. We've only been around with Christianity for 2,000 years. That means Hinduism is somewhere around 5,000 years old. and their principles are a lot different than Christianity. What do you believe about the validity of Christianity based on this religion that's much more established than us, than Christianity?
First point is, I never have argued that Jesus Christ is true because faith in him has been around for 2,000 years. Instead, when I look for truth, I really don't care how long or how old the religion is, or a philosophy, or whatever, or an economic system, or whatever.
Yeah.
Truth is not determined by how old is it. Second point, though, that I think really gets to your issue is, the Bible insists that there are going to be a lot of people in heaven who never heard the word Jesus Christ. You're making a great point, which is, God loves us, and he's been reaching out to us for thousands of years. Long before Jesus ever was born, God, by his Spirit, was reaching out, drawing people to himself, and the Old Testament gives us a partial record of that.
In that case, then, what if Hinduism's closer to the teaching of God than Christianity?
Good
What
question.
if Christianity is a more morphed, humanistic view of
Right.
the basic principles that Hinduism taught?
You bet. Well, there's only one way I know to answer that question. You better read the Vedas, Upanishads, and Bhagavad Gita, and you better read the New Testament Gospels, and you better ask yourself, does the evidence point to the avatars of Hinduism being more reliable, or does the evidence of his life, teachings, death, and resurrection point to Jesus Christ being more reliable? And then you got to make your decision. It's the only way I know for you. You can decide honestly. You got to read this stuff. And I can promise you, after reading the Upanishads and Vedas and Bhagavad Gita myself, I cannot put my faith in Hinduism.
Why is that?
Thanks for asking. Can one of you come out here?
I got it.
The stick man, all right. All right. According to Hinduism, this is part of God, this is part of God, right? Everything is part of God, including this, right? That's monism. Monism is the basis of Hinduism, which is everything is one, everything is part of God. Okay, I'm with them so far, but watch. Haul back, hit him as hard as I can. All right? What just happened?
God hit God?
Thank you. We are communicating here. What just happened, according to Hinduism, is part of God just hit part of God, which means there is no basis for justice. There's no basis for ethics. If everything is part of God, that means good is part of God, evil's part of God, apathy is part of God, everything's part of God. It just is. Gandhi understood the fallacy of Hinduism. Gandhi got his understanding that the caste system in India was wrong. Not from Hinduism, obviously. He got it from the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus teaches that there is a being separate from him and me, God the Creator. This gentleman and I are part of God's good creation. And God gave me this hand to respect and be compassionate to this man, not to haul back and hit him. That's why Gandhi fought against the caste system, because he realized the error in Hinduism. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's why, it's one of the main reasons I cannot put my faith in the avatars and buy into monism, which teaches it's all part of God. Because guess what? The rape of a woman is not God raping God. The murder of a person is not God murdering God. And the abuse of an innocent child is not God abusing a child. False. Everything within me says false. My reason, my conscience, my ability to love says, time out, that's wrong. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
God hitting God, that doesn't make sense to you. But in Christianity, it's the exact same thing. The only difference is humans put their own spin on it because they didn't understand that. So they put their own, a son of God hitting a son of God. A son is a human construct. A son does not exist in, the divine mind. A son is when you give birth, you have a son or you have a daughter. So a son hitting a son of God. It's just that human spin on that same basic idea, but yet you decide to believe in that because it's not as foreign to you, because it has its basis in our own human.
When the Bible says that you and I are children of God, they're talking about what we become. We read in John chapter 1. When you put your faith in Christ, you become a child of God. It is not saying that we are literally the offspring of God a Father and God a Mother having sex and we're born. It's not the point.
We're creation of God?
We are created in the likeness of God, in the image of God. That's right. Which means I have a free will. And if I go up to this woman and steal her money, that is me as a human being choosing to pervert the purpose for which God made me, which was to respect her, and it's me choosing to denigrate her by stealing her money. That is evil, and God judges me. He holds me responsible for that. Why? Because he gave me free will.
But so God raping God, you don't buy into. But something kind of like God and another thing kind of like God, if that thing that's kind of like God rapes that other thing that's kind of like God, that's okay? That makes sense?
No, it's not okay.
But it makes more
but
sense.
Because we have free will, no, you see, what the Bible teaches is exactly the way we experience reality, which is, I have a free will. I can love her, I can hate her. I can help her, or I can use her. And you can do the same.
Right, and just like you can do that, God can love you or God can hate you. Because that is a human construct that we apply to the divine mind because we don't understand it. So God naturally has to be like us. It's him in the Bible.
Nope.
His word.
Nope. I am convinced
understand
that I
the
can
man.
love her, not because I have to, but because I freely choose to. And I begin to realize the only way I can have a free will is if there is more to reality than matter and energy, than complex biochemical reactions. I've got to have a soul, a free will, in order to love her, because I don't have to love her. I can denigrate her. And the only way I can have a free will is if there is some type of God who creates me with a soul and gives me a free will. Why do you have such a problem with God loving you?
Because I think most of the Old Testament is bull, to be honest with you. I think the Gospels are fine. I'm a total Jesus freak. I love Jesus. Love your neighbor, totally. That's awesome. Jesus was a hippie. I think that's great. But the Old Testament has to get in with that. If you're going to buy into Jesus and you're going to buy into the we're going to heaven, you have to buy into all the stories and all the bullshit that came before that.
All right, it's real simple. It's real simple. The word mercy, the word compassion to describe God is used far more frequently in the Old Testament than it is in the New Testament. And the bloodiest book in the Bible is not in the Old Testament. The bloodiest book, exactly. The bloodiest book in the Bible is in the New Testament. It's the book of Revelation. So the Bible is horribly consistent. God is just and God is loving. God hates evil and he loves to forgive people for their evil. And that's what the cross of Christ is all about. He bled and died on that cross to pay the penalty for human evil. Now, just think about your worldview. In your worldview, evil wins.
You're saying that you can't base morality on reason? I disagree. I say you can't have morality without reason.
I agree.
There are other animals who cooperate.
Yeah.
There are other animals who refrain from hurting each other for evolutionary reasons. But it wasn't until mankind adapted reason, adapted an intellect, that we even began to have free will. But I don't think free will is something you either have or you don't, like it's an on and off switch. I think free will is something we're still acquiring. Think about your bodies. Think about what they really are. They're more or less machines. I don't care if you have reason. I don't care if you can think through things. You still have chemicals, hormones, bodily processes, systems that affect what you do and battle against who you think you are behind your eyes. But what I'm suggesting is that humans aren't just going to sit still like what they are right now. We're ascending, we're transcending, and we're going to continue to do so. Like I said yesterday, the world's becoming less violent. Why would that be? It's not because of Jesus, I don't think. It's not because of God. I mean, look at our phones. What are these? They're not going to stop at where they're at. It's just going to keep we're just going to keep integrating with the tools that we've created, and they're going to create us. I just don't think, if you look around and you look at reality, I don't think that this feedback loop, this increasing empathy, this lessening of violence, this transcendence of the human form, I don't see what it has to do with a God.
I find it amazing that you can stand there and say, we really are getting better.
Oh, I really do believe it.
I know you do.
If you just look statistically, we kill each other less, we live longer, we understand each other better, we know more, we're more literate than at any other time in history. And why did that happen? It's because humans keep walking forward. And we walk forward whether or not we think there's a God, whether or not we think the God is Allah, whether or not we think the God is the different gods of the different Hinduisms or whatever. We keep walking forward, and as we walk forward, we get better.
Okay, fine. I respect your opinion, but I disagree.
Okay.
And so does H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells was an English philosopher who lived through World War I, and he believed like you. He believed in the perfectibility of the human race through education, through technology, through scientific discovery. World War I came along, and H.G. Wells realized that World War I was the war to end all wars. But when World War II came along, H.G. Wells was confronted by the fact that the most highly educated, technologically sophisticated, scientifically oriented nation of the world, Nazi Germany, was committing some of the most horrible atrocities imaginable. Dachau, Auschwitz, and Buchenwald. And after World War II, H.G. Wells wrote a book called The Fate of Man. And in this book, H.G. Wells writes, I used to pin my hopes on the perfectibility of the human race through education, science, and technology. But I have witnessed in my lifetime a return to barbarism, violence, and slaughtering people like never before. And my faith in man is bankrupt. I respect the honesty of H.G. Wells.
But if you do look at the numbers, as our population explodes exponentially, the amount of people that we kill, like the people that we kill, is going down in proportion to our population. Like we're just not as violent as we used to be. We're just not. We're more literate. We're more connected, we're more empathetic, and we will only become more connected as time goes on. And technology is going to facilitate that. You know, this is going to become something that it's not, and it's going to do that quickly. It's going to facilitate. It's going to facilitate an increase in empathy. And I think if H.G. Wells were around today and he saw the rapid changes going on in the world, he might have a little bit more hope than he did. And if he could see human history in perspective the way that I really believe we can now.
Good. Okay, now Ryan, I respect you. I cannot thank you enough for speaking the way you have. All right, you've been outstanding. But you have just provided me now with an excellent example of one of the things I've been pleading with all of you. When you pulled out that phone and said, come on, guys.
Oh, don't misunderstand me. I don't have faith in it. I'm not placing faith.
What do you mean?
No, I'm just saying.
Oh, come on, Ryan.
No.
Come on, Ryan.
No.
Yes. Come on, Ryan. You know exactly what you did.
No, I'm not placing faith in it. I'm saying people just look at the trend. That's all I'm saying. Just look at the trend.
Ryan, come on now. Now you're broken with reason, Ryan. Come on.
Just look at the trend.
You did it beautifully, Ryan. You pulled out your phone and said, just look, guys.
No, it's an example.
This is how we're going to be connected.
It's merely an
I know it's merely an example, but what's it an example of?
It's an example
The
of the tool that we have
perfectibility of human beings by themselves.
I'm not looking for perfectibility. I'm looking for trends. I'm not looking for faith.
Better and better.
I'm just saying,
Ryan, you have beautiful faith.
Look at where we're going.
You have magnificent faith.
No, I really don't.
Yes, you do. You have faith just the same way H.G. Wells had, that we can perfect ourselves.
That's not what I'm saying. It could all collapse in the next moment. But when I look at history, when I look at the trends, it suggests that it won't collapse.
Good. So your faith is in the perfectibility of us by us.
I am looking at a verifiable trend of history. I'm not looking.
You just
at
said it could collapse.
It could, and
Okay,
that's why.
so you can't prove it,
why it's
but you
not-
have evidence based on fewer people being murdered.
Science isn't looking to prove anything beyond a shadow of a doubt. We're looking for patterns. We're looking for trends. We're
Yeah,
looking
well,
for
you have
verifying
faith in the
data. We're
perfectibility
looking
of
for
human
things-
beings by themselves. And all I'm saying is, the evidence is that Jesus Christ is more reliable than human beings. That's all I'm saying. And all I'm saying is, now you got to choose. You can choose to put your faith in technology, the perfectibility of human beings, like H.G. Wells did at one point in his life, like Ryan does now. Or you can choose to look at Jesus Christ and say the evidence is he is more reliable. But you both have faith.